Welcome back to the Homeschool Advantage podcast. I'm your host, Bex Buzzy. Today we have Tan Academy's academic coach and publicist, Krista Thomas. Tan Academy is a curricular provider of Catholic homeschool materials covering all subjects, including faith, science, history, and literature. In today's episode, we talk about how homeschooling can utilize museums and experiences to learn about the world, how to get out of the box and stop boiling education down to tests, and what it looks like to have healthy homeschooling and how that shows through our actions. We also talk about homeschooling is about lifestyle, and you do want to look at the end game of what you want your child to get out of this type of education, and how it should not look like the institution of middle school and high school down the street. We also talk about in homeschooling, hey, you may make mistakes, but that's fine. And lastly, Krista, she says, go rogue or go home. And that means we don't all need to go to college. It may actually be more beneficial for you to fund your child's entrepreneurial business endeavor of $25,000 rather than $100,000 plus for a degree they're just never going to use. Go grab your coffee, go grab your tea, and a pen and paper, because you're not going to want to miss what Krista has to say. Let's get into the podcast. Krista, say hello to our listeners and tell us one misconception you believe most have about homeschooling.
It is so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And hello to everyone. And as we have this really great conversation about homeschooling. Okay, what a great question. Misconception about homeschooling. What's funny is it's taken a couple of years. A couple of years into homeschooling, people realize that they have this misconception that homeschooling is or should look like an institution. What you really realize is that homeschooling has nothing to do with an institution, whether it's private, whether it's a hybrid, whether it's public school. Your homeschool at home is your lifestyle. Like, it is something that you can take and own and make it what you want. So you have an end goal, this end game of what you're looking for at the very end. And it takes a couple of years to realize, like, okay, this is the end game. It's really not about getting into Harvard in the end. It's not. But it is, for most people, about how to get to heaven and how you can do that with what you're reading and what you're teaching your kids and the virtues that you want to help imbue in them. I mean, this is a lifestyle that anybody can do, even though they might say they don't have patience. Okay, that's a virtue. Maybe their kids aren't obedient, which is a virtue. I mean, maybe sometimes we don't have charity because maybe we had too much caffeine or lack of sleep or what have you. But all of these things are virtues, right? Like, we think we don't have them, but God gives us the opportunity to actually grow in those virtues. I mean, we don't come out perfect in the womb, and we certainly aren't perfect on death. So, the only perfect one is Jesus Christ. And so I would say homeschooling is a lifestyle, and you want to really look at what your end game is for your kids. So the misconception is that your planning of it, the books that you choose, should not always, if at all, look like something that is going to be in your elementary, middle, or high school down the street.
Right.
Now, you do have some great people out there that teach in elementary, middle, and high school, whether it's parochial school, private, public, homeschool co-ops. Maybe there's retired people, college professors. We have some fantastic people out there that love God, want to know Him, love Him, serve Him, and their hands are really held tight about what it is that they can teach. But there are moments when they can teach outside of what they're told to teach. So this is not knocking on any profession. It's really looking at the institution itself, where it came from, and looking at, prior to that institution, what did schooling look like? What did homeschooling look like in like 1920, even the 1800s, 1700s? That really looked like a mother or a father or a tutor that would come into the home and teach the children the basics. And they were taught either one-on-one, or they were taught like in what we call a family setting, or a schoolhouse setting. But in the end, we are supposed to look different than an institution. We really are. And this is a great opportunity to just enjoy the process. It's not going to be perfect. Because it's not. We're human and we make mistakes, and sometimes we do choose wrong curriculum based on what's in the institution down the street, But
Right.
yeah, in a nutshell, that's to me the misconception that is the aha moment for people, and they go, "Wait a minute, this is a lifestyle. This can be what you want it to be. What's your end game?"
I love that. That's really awesome. I really appreciate the way you kind of laid it out and everything. I have one question. So you mentioned institutional learning. So what do you mean when you talk about institutional learning? Because I've always thought of it one way, and I'm just curious as to what your take is on institutional learning. Maybe our listeners are probably like, "Whoa, what does that mean?"
Okay, so here's a classic example. Testing can be a really great resource. It's a good assessment to kind of figure out where your child is. However, we're individuals. So when we have different charisms that God has given us. It could be that we have a charism towards STEM, or we could have a charism toward the liberal arts. So if we are going to look at our children, and as we are trying to really encourage them to be the individual that God wants them to be, an institution is not about individuals like we say it is. We want everybody to prosper, we want everybody to succeed, but in the end we have all these different tracks, and if you mess up anywhere down those tracks, then you're going to be put in track A based on an experience, or maybe you flipped up on something, and it's really hard to get out of that track. So they kind of mold you into what they think you're going to be, as opposed to letting the parent decide what is going to be best for their child. Like, we have charisms that are going to come out when the Holy Spirit just lights us on fire and we do things that we never knew that we could do. Okay, and some of those things are actually what we should be going into when we're adults. What should our profession be? If we have a servant heart, you might go toward law enforcement, but yet you feel like the school tells you that, well, you need chemistry, you're going to need physics. Well, just maybe that student is not really inclined to be STEM oriented, but is liberal arts oriented. So why are we putting them in chemistry and physics? But instead we could put them in something that's more liberal arts oriented, that would get them to think about the whole person, because they're going to be helping people out there, and they need to see people as the whole person. Because that's kind of an ideology out there. So I would look at that even with my own kids. I could see what some of their charisms coming out as they were getting older, and letting God help them, imbue them with what those tools are in their toolbox, so that they can help really bring about the kingdom here on earth. I mean, we need that, right?
Yes.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is institutions really do kind of point you in one direction. At this point, the last 2 to 3 decades, it's been college. Well, college could be good, but college isn't for everyone. And actually, I would say many people should reevaluate college based on how much it costs, based on, is your child going to be the same unique individual that's loved by God? Are they going to think that when they come out of college? Like, you really have to be careful where you put your kid. Or is it better for that child if they're showing that they're very strong-willed? They have leadership qualities, by the way. So they're strong-willed for a reason, because they want to lead. So now we have to temper the leading, right? Because it's a learned process as well. And there's tools in their toolbox they need to actually gain. But in the end, these kids might be better off in an entrepreneurial setting where you've spent $25,000 getting them set up in a business, rather than 100 plus in debt and indebted to other people like companies. Why are we doing this to people? These young people. I mean, so I think that, we got to go rogue here. Go be independent.
Go rogue or go home.
Right. Go rogue. I mean, I really do feel this way. Like, there's only a handful of colleges that I would trust my child to. There are a lot of them out there that say they're Christian. There's a lot of them out there that say they're Catholic. And I will tell you, as a convert to that faith, I will tell you that most of those Catholic schools are not Catholic. They're anything but, and they aren't serving God. So the idea is, pray about it and watch your children blossom, especially in high school, giving them opportunities. I see and counsel more families at TAN Academy that really in high school, they're saying, how can high school be 4 or 5 hours of work? And I said, it's supposed to only be 4 or 5 hours of work, because we want our students to go out there and start businesses. We want them to actually mentor other younger children. We want them to be mentored by businesses, Christian business owners. I mean, this is what we want. That transcript needs to be more than what that grade is. And so I'm going to go back to testing. We test, but do we really know? Are we teaching to a test? Are we learning to a test? Or do we really have the foundation, the basic foundation of whatever it is we're learning? And then do we have an opportunity to dive deep into that subject matter? Or do we have to move on and move on and press on to another subject when we could have really had an extra month to really go dive deep and do some extracurricular activities? Because we are super blessed in this country to have museums and to have parks and recs where our taxpayer funding is helping them come up with programs for kids. The libraries, if they're good programming. I mean, we have so much at our fingertips as homeschoolers. It is such a joy to be able to own it and go and do these things with your kids and have these experiences. Some of the experiences aren't going to be A+, it's true. But we have to have those experiences because life is like that, right? It's not always going to be, dandelions. Sometimes it'll be dandelions and sometimes it'll be roses. So it's good to have all kinds of experiences and let our kids learn about the world that God created and also what people have to offer out there in their expertise is really important.
Wow. You made so many valuable points. It's not even funny. I don't even know where to pick up from.
Well, the funny thing is that I am a product of the public school system.
Me too.
But my parents moved us out of a big city into a very, very small community. My parents are very well educated and highly educated, I should say. And when we moved to this very, very small town, I mean, I graduated in a public high school with like 22, 23 people. Okay.
Wow.
Okay. So the teachers, it was poor paying school district. So the teachers that they were getting were sometimes people that were business people coming in. They were trying to get out of what it was they were doing. And so maybe they weren't the best teachers. Maybe they were great teachers, but maybe it's that they were having to teach not out of a book, right? So my upbringing was that learning is going to be lifelong. And if I don't get algebra in 9th or 10th grade very well, and if I have to take it in a community college and have to take it again remedially, I've recognized something about myself. I am not a math person, but I can balance a checkbook. And so that's important to know who you are. And I think that it's hard when we have an institution that says, these are your benchmarks. When I think there are basic benchmarks, because I love the California Achievement Test. That's like, it's old. Okay. It's very old, but it's very basic. Let's get back to basics so that we have extra time to focus on those things that God is asking us to grow into and serve others.
So let's talk about, what is your curriculum focus on? What is the focus of your curriculum, Tan Academy?
That's a great question. So Tan Academy focuses on 3 core subjects because these 3 core subjects really do deal with the human person and how God loves us into creation, into being, and he wants to love us forever and he wants us to love him forever, right? So these 3 core subjects are religion, history, and literature, and they're all dovetailed nicely together. So everything else, we realize that we are preferential people. What you choose for math could be Saxon. It could be Singapore math. It could be this excellent book, by the way, called Algebra Survival Guide. That's awesome if you're not very good with that algebra stuff. So we know that people are preferential. So whether you want to choose your own math curriculum, you want to choose your own art program, because maybe you yourself have an art background. And so you might want to be more experiential in that you go and do the art programs that are in your local museum with experts that are trying to teach drawing, painting, or maybe what is the thinking behind 16th century art versus ancient art? Is it more practical? Is it more beautiful? Like all of these things that we can actually tap into. So I don't always think learning is going to come from a textbook. And I think about Socrates and where the Socratic method comes from, a group of people that are engaged in a subject and they're talking about it and they're using what they know. And it could be textbook based, it could be experiences, it could be a lecture that you've gone, or it could be that you went to Symphony Hall and you're listening and then you're hearing from these experts, right? So I think that we've looked at education and we've boiled it down to A, B, and C, and D. Here are your bucket list, check them off so that your kid can go to X college. And if you take the SAT or the ACT, by golly, you're guaranteed to get some money, which I actually am against the ACT and the SAT, and I would put a plug in for the CLT instead, because I think that we've gotten away from education, and we've made it such a big business that we've gotten away from really, are we educating the whole person? By the time they graduate high school, what are your check marks for them? You know, we want them to be good citizens. We want them to know that their civic duty is to vote. They need to be educated and know what their values are. And like I said, to know and love and serve God, I mean, is like primo. So what Tan Academy does, we require our enrolled families, which is a flat fee, no matter how many children you have. We look at that and say, your religion and your history and your literature are all going to be a cohesive subject base. And you can start with, we always start with history. We say you start with the ancients, or you start with medieval or modern, and then American, and then it all then rotates back all over again. So you're going to see the same subjects again. And so our literature coincides with what we're learning in that history, and then our religion as well. And so we're trying to impress upon parents that virtues, learning these virtues, living them out in these young formative years will help serve them, especially as we go on, and if there's more chaos in the world and less, morality going on. So in a nutshell, those are the three that we have. We also have a science series that families can choose to use. It's a liberal arts base. You can use all the way up through high school, and you challenge up by, adding more labs or liberal arts. Basically your art and, how you learn how to read, how you learn how to write. You can use whatever program you're comfortable with, because like I said, we have preferences, and you can teach with what you like. So that's really it in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Yeah. Wow, it's powerful. And I had a friend actually who went classical as well, and he didn't take any math or sciences at all, and graduated high school. And when he went to college, he literally, I was pretty shocked when he told me this, but he tested out of math because he knew how to learn, because he was learning things that he was really interested in. So it didn't matter that he didn't learn a certain subject. He already knew how to learn and how to think logically, which really what math is logical thinking. And
it is
being able to reason well, and he could do that. So he literally tested out of math, and he is a huge businessman, like huge. He runs a huge company across the United States.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's from a person who didn't take math once in high school, but was able to test out of it in college and went right into direct learning of what he needed to do. So I think there's just so many different misconceptions about what we need to learn. And I think there's also, an undervaluing of how the brain actually works, and what it is capable of doing. So I love your method. You have the schoolhouse method, and you're blending the classicals, and you're allowing parents to supplement other materials to bring in. And a lot of times when parents do read different books, right within the reading, there are so many opportunities to add math to it in such creative ways that, I think it just takes a moment to bring it all together. So that's really, really great. It's really exciting. So what sparked the inspiration for this type of curriculum, type of program?
That's a great question too. Tan Academy was actually built by people who were homeschooled, or are homeschooling their kids. So I have 20 years in, and basically was about to graduate my youngest, and received a phone call that my name was recommended, and they asked if I would come in and consult with them about what would it take, what did I see, and what they were seeing as far as homeschooling their own children, multiple children. I'm talking, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 8 children in one family. Like, what does that look like? And where can we support people in the mission to really homeschool to heaven? And so I came on board, and really what I found just by using several curriculums out there myself, and having to draw up my own lesson plans, and realizing that a lot of people don't have time. They don't have time to do these things. What they want is a curriculum that they can finish and it's not hanging on to the next day, because they have these lesson plans that tell them all those bucket lists of things that they have to get checked off for the day. And I can't tell you how many people feel like failures because that bucket list in each subject might be 5 or 10 different things. So you almost feel like that in itself is like, it's like going and working for a company and being told you have to get X, Y, and Z done. And you know that in that 8-hour day, there's no way you can get it done. So you go home and you think about it, you ruminate on it. It's stressful to you because the next day you realize you have what's left over from the day before, plus it's like that. That is not healthy homeschooling. Healthy homeschooling sets boundaries to say, even children, and I would say now with a lot of the electronic devices that they have grown up on now, these younger generations, they really can't sit for more than 20 minutes. They can't. I mean, we're asking them to do something that we could do easily probably 30, 40 years ago, right? Maybe 25 years ago. So we have to look at what we've done with our growing up of our children and say, like, we're responsible. Yeah. And we're showing them by our own actions, like, oh, I love my phone, or, oh, I love my computer. We're showing them that that's really an important thing. And so they're learning off of that. They're imprinting and realizing that they can do it too. They should be doing it too. And then, Mom, Dad, can I have a phone? Mom, Dad, can I have this? Mom, Dad, can I watch a movie? And so what we've done is we have looked at the attention span and we've just made it even smaller. So how do we get children to sit? How do we get them to sit for a period of time? Well, we're a heavy-based reading program. We want read alouds. We like this read aloud revival. It is super key because if your kids can hear the vernacular, they can hear the words, they're learning what these words mean, they're expanding their vocabulary by reading classic books. I'm not talking books that have been, written in the last 5 to 10 years. I'm talking, and I'm not even talking about the Caldecott winners. I'm talking really solid, great books that you and I would have grown up on, that our parents would have grown up on, that our grandparents would have grown up on, because they're virtue-based. And we need to show our children that there is good and there is evil, because there is. Right. And they can see it in stories. You can even see it in Aesop's fables, which are beautiful stories. Hans Christian Andersen. I have some families that are concerned about reading Hans Christian Andersen's stories to their children because they are scared it's going to scare their children. What should scare their children is the idea that they might end up in hell one day. That is the scariest thing ever. So why wouldn't we give them good, noble, and true stories that speak to what virtue really is? Do we want to be good or do we want to choose evil? Because there's only two sides. That's it. You choose one or the other. And we will be plagued for the entire duration of our lifespan. We will be plagued by making these choices. And sometimes we make wrong choices, but we can always, through the redemption of Christ, make new choices, right? So families should realize that reading to them, so we really highly recommend in these early years, we're reading a lot. You can use audio, you can use Audible, actually.
I was just going to ask that question.
And what's really great, I will tell you that there are many families where their kids have some learning concerns, maybe some delays. And I'm like, don't worry about it. I've got friends that their kids were not reading great because of dyslexia and some other dysgraphia, like all this kind of stuff, that until they hit high school, then they really started getting it. And so I think that is just God's filter to say, don't push a child. We can find other ways because they're smart. Kids can be really smart, and it doesn't have to be through the written word. Is that a tool? Absolutely. We should have our kids learning how to do handwriting up through 4th and 5th grade. It's true. We should also institute spelling, especially in the middle school years and high school years. But it doesn't mean that you have to teach those things immediately with success, because we don't want to be comparative. We want to be contributive with our kids and with community, not comparative. And this goes back to institutional learning. What are we doing? We have benchmarks. If you're not here, you're going down this track. If you're not here, you're going down that track. And that doesn't really hold up to who we are as humans. We all have different rates of learning. So if your child is really having a hard time sitting still for 20 minutes, I would be looking at what's happening in that behavior. I see it in church all the time, by the way. Okay, we're going to feed our child Cheerios during church service. Granted, within 15, 20 minutes, they're wondering why their child is not behaving, right? Well, they've just been fed. They can actually fast. Children can fast too during that 1 hour time or whatever it is. So I'm just bringing this up to say that we should, to be comparative instead of contributive. I mean, to be comparative instead of contributive means that you are now looking at somebody else's goals and making them your own. Make your own, own it.
That is huge. That is so powerful. And I'm glad you mentioned the online option as well, like the Audible, because I know for me, when I read, sometimes I can just read, no problem, with nothing. But then there are those days where my mind doesn't seem to be connecting with my reading for some reason. It could be the same book that I've been reading, and I have to also hear it while I'm reading. But there are those moments where I even myself have to understand where I am at. And I believe when you're able to give your child a choice, they can tell you, Mom, I'm good, or, Dad, can you play that for me? It'll help. And that also teaches them to have a voice in speaking about what can help them to learn better, and I think it's another powerful thing. So another powerful thing about homeschooling is that a child will learn their best way of learning, and they will understand themselves very much because they're not comparing themselves to other children, which I think is really crazy sometimes when you think about it, that we're telling our children, you must compare yourself to another child. Right. I mean, that's why, because we as adults, we tell each other, don't compare yourself to anybody. You have to be better than what you were yesterday, which in homeschooling allows you that to become better than what you were yesterday at your pace. And that's really the whole point of education, right? Like that's what we do. So when a family chooses to go with Tan Academy, what are some things they should consider when they're looking into your curriculum and your program?
Right. Well, that's an excellent question, because most curricula that you purchase will say, this is first grade, buy everything in first grade. Here's second grade, buy everything in second grade. Here's third grade, and here's eighth. And by the time you add all that up, people actually think that they cannot afford to homeschool. And it's true. If you go that direction, you probably can't. So what happens is they end up saying, well, I'll only buy some things in first grade, and then maybe there'll be a catch up later. But what Tan Academy, what our whole premise is that we want families to learn together. So if you think back over 100 years ago, you had teachers who would go into communities, and it was the time when there wasn't the harvest going on. And the teacher would ring the bell, the kids knew to come, and they only had a set part of the day they would come, 4 hours maybe, and then they had to head home, which might have been, a 2-hour walk home, right? And then they had to do chores at home. And so during harvest time, there wasn't any school. So what happened in that schoolroom? Did you have all third graders? No, you didn't. You had kids of all ages and all abilities. So with Tan Academy, we say, let's look at your children. Who do you have? Well, you have a second grader, you have a fourth grader, and you have a seventh grader. If your seventh grader is academic, your seventh grader can handle doing the seventh grade or take part of the subject. So in other words, history, you can do everybody together. You can do religion, everybody together. Literature could be together, but your seventh grader is probably going to read from the seventh grade list that's historically bound to that history. And then your other kids may be still learning to read, or maybe they're just going gangbusters, and so they're reading to the younger set, or they're all listening to audio and they're doing narration exercises afterwards, because our program is really a blend of classical and traditional methodologies, because we know people are preferential. We want everybody to have an opportunity to pick the kind of homeschool journey that they want. So what we do is we have counseling sessions, unlimited coaching throughout the year to help families figure out, are you going to do fourth grade religion with everyone? Because we are content rich. So whether you're in seventh grade or fourth grade or second grade, you're going to understand what's there. And then our whole high school program, you can actually homeschool your high schoolers together. So if you've already had American history and you're in 11th grade, and then you've got a ninth grader who's still got American history to go, because technically American history is what we say is ninth grade. It's the same thing. You could put your kids, all of your kids in 11th grade, and do 11th grade together in high school.
Right, because who's to say where your learning is?
Yes.
Learning is learning, and that
it's learning. Yes.
That's really
learning
great.
is learning. And so we really want families, especially the mom or the dad who's staying home to implement this, to know that they can sit at their kitchen table or at the kitchen bar, or if they've got a homeschool classroom, they're all sitting there. They don't have their kids coming back and forth and I need you, I need you, I need you for the individual help. So they will need individual help on math. They will need individual help on maybe grammar and maybe learning how to read. But even some of the kids are in the same math together. You'd just be amazed, because you can challenge up some kids if they're kind of if they're just there because they have that kind of brain that's really, math and science focused.
Right.
And we really want families to be able to feel like they're not having to buy every single subject in every single grade. We're trying to save people money. And yes, I mean, it's true. Curriculum providers, technically, they want you to buy as much as you possibly can, right?
Well, of course, right? Yeah.
But our mission isn't to do that. Our mission is to really to homeschool to heaven and to be joy-filled in it. So your homeschool day may look like in kindergarten, 1 hour a day. If you're going to homeschool, like say you've got 3 elementary school students, it might be like 3 hours, because you're going to take that block of time to do one-on-one for reading exercises or the math.
So let's look at that. I love the fact that your curriculum is multi-generational. Like not multi-generational, but it's multi-age. Yeah. So walk me through what a lesson looks like. And my second question with that, would a parent have like a manual that would help them walk through it step by step with their children?
Right. So we have lesson plans all the way through high school. And the lesson plans are that you can swap every single subject you want except for religion, history, and literature. Those are the 3 you cannot swap because they're all dovetailed together. So let's just say, for instance, you're starting with ancient history and you have a 6th grader, you have a 3rd grader, and you have a 1st grader or a 2nd grader. Well, we're going to say, okay, let's start with the fact that the 6th grade is going to be ancient history. We really start with ancients, and then 7th is medieval, 8th is modern. And then you start the cycle all over again. And you will start that cycle at 2nd grade, starting with the ancients. So your 2nd and your 6th grader were like, let's use what we call Story of Civilization. And it has an audio feature with it. So it's a dramatization they can listen to and feel like they're actually hearing the drama go on, right? And they get excited and immersed in the history of that chapter. Then you can follow up with reading different parts of the text, but the lesson plan will tell you, read the textbook first and break it up. Break it up into sections that shows you where to do that, and do narration exercises. Now you have an option. You don't have to do that. If you're having a really busy week, maybe you have to take care of your mother-in-law because she was in the hospital, or maybe your dad lost your job, and maybe you've got some other duties and some really stressful things going on. You don't have time to actually read the textbook. Utilize that audio. So the kids are going to listen to that. And then you're going to go to the activity workbook, and you're going to pull out an activity. Could be the maps that they're going to be working on that coincide with the history that you learned. And then there's another optional activity to do. In that, we have a lot of schools that are actually turning to our programs because they can do it in cycles. It's a 4-year cycle of ancient, medieval, modern, American, and it just cycles back over again. So you can challenge up with your 6th grader, which means you can actually add more reading for your 6th grader on those various topics. You can look and see at the museums, and let's just say they're having a special presentation on ancient, maybe it's ancient art and what some of the artifacts are. You would want to go and do that. So maybe your 2nd grader isn't going to get as much as your 6th grader, but you still have exposure. And that's really what a liberal arts curriculum is we want to expose people so that to the good and the true and the beautiful, all of this noble stuff, so that they'll have memories, and they will be driven to explore those areas and dive deeper when they go to the library next. Or if they have a birthday party, they may be really into the Egyptians. So you put on an Egyptian birthday party. You can really do a lot of stuff and have fun and be creative. But we help people do that. So they're very simple lesson plans. We don't have the check off list of here's your 10 your 10 items you have to get done today. We really don't do that. We just say, read, here's an activity, and the next day read some more, talk about it, have a Socratic discussion with your kids, see what they remember. Because the biggest thing is is also memorization, having those opportunities to have your kids memorize, and that we do have what's sort of an enrichment program where they are memorizing and they're repeating back. That's so key. Or if you don't want to do that, you can simply get a really great old-fashioned, seriously, a traditional poetry book. Robert Louis Stevenson, he's got some wonderful poems that are just meant for children. I love The Harp and the Laurel. It's a really great book that has a bunch of poems in it that go all the way up to the different stages of learning, from elementary all the way up to high school, that you can have your kids memorize. But there's just some fun things that you can do. And you can do this with families. You can go in with another family and say, hey, why don't we do this learning together? So it's easy to do religion, literature, and history all together combined. You don't, and I do know that it is across the country. We have a lot of public school teachers. They are fantastic and they don't like what's happening, but yet they want to be employed. And there are certain cities where families are looking to employ these teachers. And so these teachers have this curriculum right at their feet, basically, that they could just implement it. And then they tell the parents on the off days, here's what you're going to do. And so most of our stuff is 4-day a week. We really want there to be a day where kids are going to a co-op, or you're having kids over, you're going to the park, you're going to field trips. I mean, we need to have these experiential experience. We need these experiences. The kids need them.
That's awesome. So we've talked about a lot. We talked about your curriculum is multi-age. It obviously is multi-sensory. It hits auditory, tactical, reading. You have the Socratic method that goes in there. You talk about having them memorize, and you also have community in there. You have a really wide range of things that you can do with yours. And I'm going to assume that parents can do your curriculum wherever, if they are traveling, or if they stay home, or if their kids are sports, etc. The lifestyle seems to be, it seems like your curriculum is going to really support a lifestyle as well. So as we're wrapping it up, where can they find you? Where would they be able to get your resources?
Sure. I would encourage anybody to come to TAN Academy, TANacademy.com. We do have complimentary coaching. There is a really great tab, and it's the curriculum tab. Just click on the tab. There's a drop down that kind of gives you like the religion, the literature, and the history. But if you click on curriculum, it really kind of gives you, it's kind of a hidden page, if you will. It's really great because it gives you more of a flow of how things work, and just puts the control back in the parents' court about what they're looking to do. What is your end game? We are going against the grain. We really are, because we want people to understand it is a lifestyle, and it's a lifestyle that these kids will learn how to be entrepreneurs. They'll be able to critically think about what it is that society wants them to do, but to be a moral force out there in the world that's much, much needed.
Wow. Awesome. Man, this has been such a great talk. So is there one thing you'd want our listeners to take away from our conversation today?
They can do it.
Got it. I love that.
They can do it because, we are all trying, we're all trying to be virtuous people. And so we're not going to be perfect every day. And it's not about failure. This is about giving your kids the friendships within their own family. I wouldn't have done it any other way. I'm really, really blessed to have been able to do this. And so we just really wanted the people to do it. Just jump in and make it a lifestyle, because it's fun.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Krista, for just being here and spending this time with us. Thank you for sharing everything.
It's been great. I so appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and to help others kind of look at what they can do and really make the most of the life that God gave them.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Homeschool Advantage podcast, where you get the scoop on all the latest vendors that fit your lifestyle. Thanks for listening. Also, follow me wherever you listen to your podcast to stay up to date on the next episode. You can also visit my website where the episodes will be, and for my free lesson plan course, which can help you if you have different vendors and you're wondering, how do I make them all flow together? Let me help you with that. And if you're a vendor and you think you would like to be on the podcast, send me an email. realedtalk@gmail.com. Leave me your name, contact, website, and I'll get back to you. Thanks for stopping in with me, and I'll see you on the next time.